Namaskar, this is Tilak Datta. Welcome back to my channel. This is the fifth and last part of this particular series. I will draw up some conclusions in the next session, not in this one. Here we continue with the subject of Bhagwanji's decoys or dummies, which I initiated in the last session. To begin with, I think it's tough to even imagine one single such decoy for Bhagwanji or Subhas Bose who could replicate, almost what he was doing. The point is, Bhagwanji told Leela Roy as early as 1963 that he was personally training 5 such doubles or decoys or dummies to deal with any situation, including knowing the smallest details about his own life. This is on record. So imagine 5 doubles. It's difficult to imagine one. It's indeed baffling. Point is, did all these doubles come with him when he crossed over into India? When did they start their functioning? As early as Lucknow, Basti, Neemsar? There is no clear answer. Let's presume one decoy held fort, so to say, when Bhagwanji went out, whenever he did. Other doubles carried out specific tasks internationally. Each one could have had a specific function. This is one way of looking at it. But then, how did these doubles come in and out without his attendant Saraswati Devi not even knowing, right? It's a question which baffles me all the time. Were one or more of them in astral form? There is no answer. Why I mention astral form? Just see what Bhagwanji says. He says, a Purna Siddha can manifest himself in his physical body through astral at hundreds of widely different places at the same time. Pandit Ravi Shankar told me of his personal experience when a very powerful yogi was with him, sitting with him, while exactly at the same time, the same yogi was seen to be present with a group of disciples far away because there was an emergent situation which needed to be attended. In this context, please also note the quotation from Subhas Chandra Bose himself to Kitty Korti in Germany in the 1930s, where he says, there are certain sannyasis or holy men who, though far away, are able to appear and talk to you. So let's examine this further. All these doubles would have to be of a similar age as Bhagwanji. They would have, all of them, I'm sure, would have their own old age problems if they were in the physical bodies, that is. These doubles could validate everything which Bhagwanji said or did, except, of course, his tremendous powers or siddhis or vibhutis. And of course, especially the double in Faizabad could be somewhat boastful in his talks. Perhaps he also had a very fiery temper. Now, this is a far cry from the sober Subhas Bose, who was known to keep his innermost thoughts to himself. The same Faizabad double could have developed an inconsistent and often suspect lingo, manner of speech, as he became older, especially during the last decade of his known life. He could make occasional errors, for instance, like mistaking Subhash Chandra Bose's mother's birth date, or make spelling mistakes. This double could be an expert to spin fables, to divert or confuse people who were too inquisitive. For example, the Hitler story, maybe the Hiroshima bombing, or the McNamara story. There is no telling which one was a fable to divert somebody and which one was the original. By September 1985, therefore, either Bhagwanji had passed away, he had already left his weary body, his mortal coil, much earlier, in full control of himself and his mission. Whereas the primary double, who was possibly in Faizabad at the end, had to stay there as per Bhagwanji's instructions, or the man had nowhere else to go and had to live out his last days or years. Please note, by then, the need, long before that in fact, the need for this particular double to be extra cautious had obviously tapered off. Here, hence we find the evidence of this person allowing easier audience to followers or being more open to discussions, much more in fact than the first decade of Bhagwanji's recorded life behind the curtain. So now I come to the invaluable video with Dr Dashrath Singh Tomar from Faizabad, which was uploaded by Chandrachur Ghose, which has been widely seen. I am providing the link in the text to my video below. Dr. Tomar says he saw Bhagwanji wearing a sacred thread and speaking in a high-pitched voice, whereas Subhas Chandra Bose was not a Brahmin. Dr. Tomar even mimicked the voice several times. He says he saw Bhagwanji had a slim body profile and used to carry out Oma Oma at night from the pain which he suffered. Now, does this match the description of Bhagwanji as testified by other visitors such as Surajit Das Gupta, from the voice to the girth, or even the descriptions of Dr. Priyabata Banerjee or his wife Rita Banerjee? Do they match? And the voice tenor, does it match? In fact, it doesn't at all. Chandrachur Ghose told me that Dr. Tomar was cross-questioned by them about his assertions, but he stuck to his narrative. Now, this sighting of Bhagwanji by accident happened in the early 1980s. So who was the person with whom Dr. Tomar interacted? The original Bhagwanji from the 1950s or a double? Or the other possibility could be that Bhagwanji had indeed physically left the area, Faizabad, this whole area, but he may have very well dropped his mortal coil some years later and not lived till now. There is no compulsion to believe that Bhagwanji is alive in the same body. I repeat, in the same body, alive in the same body. This can happen, as I have mentioned earlier, but only under extraordinary circumstances which are permitted or mandated. By whom? The divine mother energy who Bhagwanji always claimed was driving him. Is that it? I have explained this aspect of mandate or protocol already under the protocol series of this series, part 2 and 3, including quotations from Pandit Ravi Shankar. It is possible, but I claim no direct knowledge for this. Nor do I see any need to blindly believe some people who are proxies, so to say, who claim he is in the same body in some Gyanganj. However, all that I have said so far about the issue of decoy, double or dummy will be invalid. It is false if there was nobody else except an aging, solitary man who lived out his life in Uttar Pradesh between the mid-1950s and 1985. So I come to the letters. What about all the letters? Chandrachur Ghose tells me that the kind of depth evidenced in Bhagwanji's early letters to Pavitra Mohan Roy and others is not there in the later letters to, for instance, Surajit Das Gupta. Now here I make a diversion. Have we considered astral writing? Is this utter nonsense? How can this happen over a 20-year period, if only as a possibility? How can it match? So let's consider this. Sri Aurobindo wrote a complete book titled Yogic Sadhan, allowing a disembodied soul to write it using Sri Aurobindo's hand and pen. Why? Because Sri Aurobindo was trying to find out how much of truth was there and how much of subliminal suggestion from his own consciousness that there could be in phenomenon of this kind. So keeping on this issue, he was trying to find out how much was actually coming from his own consciousness, or was there actually a disembodied soul who could write through him. A full book is written like this. So keeping on this issue, I will now come to the very well-known example of the SETH or SETH material or papers, which are even stored in Yale University and as a matter of research. Jane Roberts, for almost 20 years, spoke and sometimes wrote in a hand which was not her own. It belonged to a disembodied entity who called himself SETH. Jane's husband, Robert, wrote complete books transcribing what SETH spoke through her, that is Jane Roberts. Sometimes she would pick up a pen and write sentences which were consistent between sessions, but which she herself could never replicate when she was out of this kind of trance. You must note, this character died pretty early, at the age of 55. Of course, this was hotly contested and disputed by many skeptics as a fraud, but also believed by hordes of people. What is noteworthy is that the lady herself was open to the possibility, just like Sri Aurobindo, that all this information could have been lying in her own subconscious and did not come from somewhere else. There was no SETH. There was some SETH was in her subconscious, that this was a possibility. She accepted it could be so. So she was open to whatever she was saying being researched and examined. The point is, once you read the matter from the SETH material, it takes your breath away. There were all sorts of information, including unknown languages and symbols, which no consciousness could have a knowledge to. In fact, I have just discovered that many people have posted in 2020, that's last year, about what SETH spoke on pandemics and virus attacks that far back. I am providing one such link. There are many, among many others, in the text below. This SETH material was in fact one of the original forerunners of what is today known as New Age spirituality. It was really something which sparked that. I understand even people like Dr. Deepak Chopra and famous author Richard Bach, the person who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull, they were all influenced by this SETH material, series of dictated books. Now, there have been many such cases otherwise too. The famous Srinivasa Ramanujan, take him. He said all his formulae were dictated to him by his family deity, Mother Goddess, in his dream state. And today the applications are phenomenal. There is also a disembodied entity called Patience Worth, who wrote several novels through Paul Curran between 1913 and 1938, whereas Paul Curran only had an 8th grade education and couldn't have written all this on his own. Now, over the years, a group of scientists and psychiatrists have examined these phenomena on many counts, such as incipient schizophrenia, was this the case, dissociative identity disorders, fraud, cryptomnesia, hypnosis, extra high creativity, psi functioning, and so on. At the least, they have accepted that there was no nullified intent, that these writings were real. That is why Yale University stores the SETH material for research, because they were worthy of a second look for the still unfolding possibilities of man's evolution. I'll quote one concluding remark from one of these studies. The psychiatrist says, such phenomena are in the domain of world experience. Let me read this. But far beyond explanation. I want to emphasize that we can and should no longer wish them away. As with psychiatric systems, any world view may have its own limits of relevance. Ours is being challenged now. Therefore, could Bhagwanji have been writing all along in his astral body through his decoy? Was the real Bhagwanji disembodied as he claimed? I repeat what he is quoted to have said again and again. Please believe me, that's what Bhagwanji said. Please believe me that I am a disembodied entity. I have been kept alive due to the mission set out for me by the Divine Mother. Were some of the letters also originally written by some decoy? Can we dismiss this as fantastic, nonsensical? Once again, which court of law will accept these possibilities? It could very well have been a double who sometimes met the Banerjees and all the others more and more openly, either all through or off and on. By then, the double had acquired some glow of the mastermind shadow behind him too. Quite likely the double was also into Tantra and astrology, apart from having links with personalities including RSS leaders, either independently or in keeping Bhagwanji's ties alive. Now here I am in fact reminded of Akira Kurosawa's film Kagemusha, where a double or a decoy takes up the role of, being a decoy for the Japanese warlord who had died, and he had to mimic this person. So sincerely and thoroughly did he do this that he literally became the dead man and lived out his master's beliefs. He became more and more like him. And eventually he died for the same cause, though he was simply a hired man who looked exactly like the master. Now here, Bhagwanji's double or doubles could not be detected by Saraswati Devi, as I have discussed with Chandrachur Ghose. Even Dr. Mishra may not have known who were all the doubles. Dr. Mishra's oft quoted, very often he has been quoted to have said, Bhagwanji said he will have coffee with me. That's after 1985. This one could very well have been a dodge from one such double. In my book, I have referred several times to a particular fragrance associated with Mahakaal. This was a direct quote from my talks with in 2012 with Dr. Mishra. Apparently, Bhagwanji told Mrs. Mishra that she would know of his presence from a rose fragrance. This even happened once before 1985. Further, in this context, Bhagwanji said that he would return and they would recognize him. In other words, he would not look the same. But Mrs. Mishra passed away recently without the reappearance of Bhagwanji, at least from what is known to us. Was this comment made by the double or Bhagwanji himself? Did he appear to them later in some astral form? I don't have an answer to this. It could also be another double from whom Baldev Trikha and others met. It is also possible that Bhagwanji was in Tashkent while his double held fort in Ayodhya. Was this the reason that Bhagwanji could attend to some administered land where he had a secret mission? Which self was a decoy in flesh and blood and which one was astral? The DNA test on the teeth which were found in Faizabad, this is an issue going on right now, right? Could be a pointer. It will either confirm that Bhagwanji's association with the Bose family, or it could have been put there to divert attention in case it showed up as a false match. Even if it matches, the man in question may have died much earlier or even left for a different destination. Who can say whether Dr. Mishra put the teeth there on the 16th September night as per instructions of Bhagwanji? We don't know. Which was the real Bhagwanji and which was the decoy on any given day? Out of the few hundred odd sessions attended by his followers from Kolkata or Faizabad, how many were with the original man and how many with the double? 1%? 10? 20? 90? The predictions, the laments, the spiritual talks, I'm including all. I don't know. No one except the highest adepts, I think, can tell with certainty as to which one was the original and which one was the decoy or the decoys. That's why I have Leela Biswas state in my book, what a complicated mystery. Well, it has been made complicated by an entity who ensured that he would remain inscrutable. This is why I have two quotations right at the head of my book from Sri Aurobindo and Mahakaal. The first is, I am inscrutable by Mahakaal. And the second one from Sri Aurobindo reads, nobody can write my life because it has not been on the surface for man to see. Please note, both were tantrics. Next, on this point, Sri Bijoyanag, that is our Bijoyada, he told me that when he went for the first time in 1970 to meet Bhagwanji, after his aunt and foster mother, that's the legendary Leela Roy, had passed away, the first thing, when he went there, the first thing Bhagwanji told him was, in Bengali, Tomar Pishi Amar Shate Ekhane Boshe Achen, which means, your aunt is sitting with me right now. Bijoyada was speechless. What is this? PTSD. Mentally deranged. What will you make of this? So Bhagwanji alluded to Leela Roy being alive and present with him that early. At one shot, I think, this explains all the projections made by him, whether by himself or through his double, that certain events would happen when Leela Roy, Pavitra Kumar Roy, Dr. Mishra, Santosh Bhattacharya, whoever, when they were still alive, because as I have earlier explained, in that realm, all these souls are alive for Bhagwanji in astral form as real witnesses. Except that he never clarified this. Many Nath yogis and others too speak in this manner, that the world after death is the real world and that our world is the dream world for working out karma. Dr. Mishra told me that sometimes in the later years, Bhagwanji used to catch cold inexplicably overnight. When questioned, he ruefully admitted that he had to go out in the bitter winter cold in his astral form to meet unknown people or entities and return to his vital bare body, making him susceptible to certain sudden colds. The quotation was, "Kya karoon? Jana hi padta hai. I have to go out." Who was this? I have already referred in my sessions to the miraculous incident which Dr. Vishwambar Nath Arora has put on record with Chandrachur Ghose, where a big medical shop appeared after midnight and vanished by the next morning. Now note, Dr. Arora was no believer. In fact, as an investigative journalist, he was looking into the whole Bhagwanji story with a hawk eye approach at that time in 1985. He, as well as several others, have experienced similar enormous power demonstrations of this from Bhagwanji at play till recently. In fact, events happening even in 2019 and 2020. But they cannot, and they will not speak in public because they will be ridiculed. People will make fun of them. They cannot produce proof, nor can these experiences be court certified. So my hypothesis on this issue, the original Bhagwanji, Subhas Bose, whatever you would like to conclude, with all the inner knowledge of past associations with his earlier followers such as Leela Roy, Pavitra Mohan Roy, whoever, armed by his phenomenal tantric energies, was always in control of the situation and always present. He was driving things as a master. For his mission, he would not take the slightest chance. Not with Pavitra Mohan Roy, nor Dr. Mishra, nor anybody. Hence the doubles and all the stories to divert people. His presence could have been real, it could have been astral. But, and this is the big but, for this interpretation to be true, we would have to presume that yes, Bhagwanji had reached that highest state, and that he was not a small-time black magic adept. It is not an open and shut case by any means. In closing, I will bring up a reference to Anuj Dhar's first book, Back from Dead. This issue of double or dummies could be precisely why a Government of India official gave a response to Anuj Dhar, quoted in that book, that the man who lived in Ram Bhavan was a close follower of Netaji. I can't emphasize this possibility more. Ditto Dr. Mishra, when he says that people mistook Bhagwanji for Netaji, or his quote that this person was like his grandfather and not Netaji. Strictly speaking, they could even be right. Except that they all, especially the Government of India, knew the truth and blatantly hid the fact that the real Netaji, Bhagwanji, Mahakaal, had also been there all along in complete control of the situation. Even if the government declares today that Bhagwanji was indeed Subhas Chandra Bose, the actual dimensions of his operations cannot be revealed or explained by them, because such happenings cannot be put up in a court of law. That's all for today. In the next session, I'll wrap it up, draw some conclusions, and touch upon certain other topics. Thank you so much for your patience. Take care. Bye-bye.